Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Arm talk. Hey, hello? Who is this?
Hi, yes. Hello, welcome to Armcast.
Hello. Yeah. We're talking about our arms.
We're talking
no
about
one's gonna
our
get that.
boom arms. Look it up on Google.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched Barbarian.
Barbarian. Barbara? Ian?
Barbarian.
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 Barbarian is one of those words that when I look at it, it's like, that's not how it's spelled, is it? Like,
right.
It seems
like a
wrong.
Fucking idiot spelled it. Yeah.
Yeah. Barbarian? Really?
Yeah. No. Bad word. Bad.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
This is 476 Barbary, right?
Yeah, I'm renting this place.
No, I booked it a month ago.
Are you sure you have the right place?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do?
Why don't you come inside and we'll call these idiots.
Oh my goodness, Tom. This is a horror movie.
It is.
It just came out this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even check to see what else was playing. It was just like, yeah, Barbarian, right? It's been getting a lot of very good reviews.
Yes.
It's being compared to like a Malignant or like where people are like, you won't believe what's happening in this movie.
Yes.
How did you like Barbarian?
Dave, I won't lie to you. I really enjoyed this movie.
Same. I really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah. All right.
I don't think it's perfect, but I had a lot of fun watching this movie. It was a blast. I would actually say that the comparisons of like it being like a shocking Malignant type film, I don't know about that. Because I don't know, from the trailers, I was like, yeah, there's like some sort of monster, right? And then the reveal is, spoilers, there's some sort of monster.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
there is indeed
it's a monster.
Some sort of monster. Like the Metallica documentary, Some Kind of Monster.
Exactly.
It was actually James Hetfield scampering around down there in that dungeon.
Yeah.
Let me out of this dungeon!
That would have been a twist. Now this is about a woman who goes to a Airbnb in a rundown Detroit neighborhood.
Dave, one second. Give me food, give me light, give me tapes that I can watch here. All right.
All right, you good?
I think I got it all out of my system. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also occupied by another guy who booked it. That's what the trailer says.
Mm-hmm.
That is almost completely a misdirect. Because that has nothing to do with the movie.
Thematically it does, but not as much plot-wise, no.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Keith, played by
Bill Skarsgård.
one of the
vampires.
Billy Skarsgård. Yep. And they have a couple nights. She has a job interview there. They really get along. They hit it off.
Although he is a tumbling bastion of red flags.
Yeah, he's just like really weird.
He's weird. He's weird, and he's incredibly pushy.
Yeah, he's doing like a Norman Bates.
Yes.
Yeah. At first he's a little creepy about it. He's like, he's real
pushy. He won't take. He keeps. And this is kind of ties to the theme of the movie. Like he keeps he won't relent until he gets the answer from her that he wants.
Right. And so this all leads to, as seen in the trailer, she goes down to the basement to look for toilet paper and accidentally finds. Oh, she accidentally locks herself in the basement, and she finds a secret room with a camera and a bed,
and a bucket.
That's it, and a bucket, right? And it's like, oh, this is a bad place.
Yeah.
And then she finds an even like, no, she doesn't right away, right?
No, she does. She does see the staircase.
She finds,
yeah.
Okay, she does. And then she goes to and then Bill Skarsgård gets back, and she's like, oh my god. There's this horrible secret room down there. Bill goes to check it out and suddenly disappears, and she hears him yelling. This is all what you see in the trailer.
Yes.
And it all leads into him basically being like, something bit me down here. I don't know what it is. We have to be quiet. And this lady, this monstrous looking lady.
This WNBA player, she is super tall.
Yeah.
This is like this 7-foot nude lady who...
A ghoul.
It's a ghoul.
It's a ghoul.
She's clearly been living underground her entire life.
Yeah, runs up and she immediately kills Bill Skarsgård. And then we do a hard cut. And I think this is where people felt like it was Malignant-esque, where it takes a turn.
Yeah, I felt it's more like...
I wouldn't even call it a turn. It's just a cinematic... It's just a storytelling choice.
It's psycho. It's like, this is a familiar...
Yeah.
This is a familiar, not trope, but like storytelling
right.
decision in thrillers and horror and suspense, where we will abruptly switch protagonists partway through.
Right, and that's what happens. And we switch to Justin Long, who...
My God, Dave... He is so fucking good in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Justin Long playing a profound piece of shit.
Just the biggest. Shane Dawson, fucking any of those, the Paul brothers, any of those YouTube ghouls that's like built their own weird collectives, but are also like really toxic. Like, he is every one of those people rolled together, and he is playing it so delightfully.
Yeah, this is the point. The point is for him to be terrible.
Yeah, you do not like him.
Yeah, he's driving down the PCH, I believe, and he gets a phone call from like his people about a pilot or a TV show that's not going to go forward with him attached, because there are now allegations against him of him assaulting a woman, and
his
it's
co-star.
going to go public.
It's specifically his co-star, or actually, it's not clear if he's an actor in the pilot. He might just be like
I couldn't tell. He could be a producer.
The actress in the pilot has accused him of sexual assault.
Yep.
And everybody drops him.
Everybody drops him, and it's so he's running out of money, and so we learn that he owns the house of the Airbnb, and he's going to Detroit to look at his properties because he needs money. And he doesn't want to get rid of his expensive house. He wants to see if he can get rid of those houses. It's unclear exactly.
They hint at it earlier, where Bill Skarsgård mentions that he's part of this artists collective and that they bought up all these houses. So the assumption, and the movie doesn't spell this out for you, and it's actually something I appreciate. It doesn't spell a whole lot of things out for you, which I appreciate. Not that things are ambiguous at all. It just doesn't.
No. It just doesn't need to.
It doesn't feel the need to over-explain itself.
It was just like okay, yeah, he owns the house.
So
that made as much sense as it needed to.
So they set up that like Keith is probably part of the collective that, like, because Keith says, he tells the lady whose name is Tess, he tells her, I'm not the guy, but I'm one of the guys. So like the assumption is that Justin Long is the guy. Like, he's the guy that is like the head of this collective, and he bought up all this property in Detroit because it's cheap.
Right. So he shows up, and we learn very quickly that he absolutely raped this woman. He pretty much confesses to a friend.
He does confess in the bar. He says it's basically...
Yeah, he confesses. He sugarcoats it, but he confesses.
But in a way that like it thematically connects to Keith, because the scenario he described is basically pressuring this woman into sex. And so it's like... Whereas Keith is like the nice guy, quote unquote, version of that, but he's still incredibly pushy. Like, he didn't give in until he got his way. Justin Long is the same, except he's like the more monstrous, more harmful version of that.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that they're both pushy.
A lot of this movie is about something that Teth says earlier on, where it's like, imagine if our roles were reversed. Like if you had come to the door and I was the one who was in the Airbnb, would you have come in? And Keith is like, yeah, absolutely. And she's like, see, I had like, it was a terrifying decision for me to come in, and like I wouldn't have invited you in at all.
Right.
So she points out that like men can just walk into situations that women can't, and like Keith and Justin Long both do that with the horror dungeon. They just blunder in there like nothing's gonna happen to them.
They don't care. I mean, the movie's called Barbarian for a reason, I guess. And so that's exactly what happens. Is Justin Long, this has been like weeks after, or we don't know how long after. It's implied that it's been a week or so.
I think it's been. I think when he gets to his house in Detroit and sees Tess's luggage there and that the key is gone, he calls his property manager, and she says the last people checked in 3 weeks ago. So it's been about 3 weeks.
Yeah, and so he's looking around and he finds the secret room, and to him, he's just like, "Oh, this adds value."
He starts measuring the square footage. Like like his response to finding this obvious like rape dungeon is to go up to Google, do unfinished basements count towards square footage, because he's trying to sell his house.
And he starts just going. It's the audience lost their shit for him because it was so funny.
It's really funny.
Justin Long's a cartoon character. He's a cartoon character.
He is a cartoon douche. He has no redeeming qualities. He's a clownish douchebag. Like, and he plays it so well.
Yeah, he does. So he starts measuring the square footage of this dungeon.
In this this fucking sinister ass haunted dungeon. He's just like dragging this tape measure.
Well, again, I think it's the idea that these obvious red flags. It's just goes completely over his head because he doesn't. He's not looking at the world through that lens at all, and couldn't be farther from that lens.
Yeah.
And he finds the staircase. When he finds the staircase,
he like clicks his heels. He's like, "Oh boy, even more space!" And it's like that is a portal to hell. Yeah, like what? He is so excited about it.
It's so funny.
And he
goes down there, and sure enough, he runs into the monster.
Yes.
And he runs away and gets trapped in a pit with the lady
with Tess.
With Tess, yeah. And she explains, like, you have to be quiet, be calm.
Yeah, you can't freak out.
We also do a flashback here where we flash back to learning the origin of this house, which is that
the house was owned in the 80s by Portman from Doom.
Yep, Richard Blake. The moment I saw him, I was like, well, that's the murderer.
Well, he's a serial killer because that's the only thing he ever gets cast to play.
Yeah. He just looks like a serial killer.
Joe Chill from Batman Begins.
Yep.
And it does this cool thing. Like, we're kind of going through the plot, but like, I really like the filmmaking of this movie. And I think how they handle the flashback was a really cool idea. It's mostly over the shoulder, or like it always follows behind Richard Brake, and it's this fisheye lens.
Yeah.
And
it's really cool.
It both conveys that it's a flashback, and it's also unsettling. Like, it's creepy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you know immediately what he's up to.
Yeah,
it's this fisheye, and the aspect ratio changes, I believe.
I think so. Yeah, I think it becomes like, what is it?
4:3 or something.
4:3. Yeah, I couldn't remember the ratio.
Yeah, and he's clearly kidnapping women.
Yeah, he goes to the store to buy kidnapping supplies. He spies on this woman.
He's impregnating women.
Yeah.
Yeah. He pretends to be a gas company and goes in and unlocks
the window. Yeah, and the movie doesn't dwell on it. It just shows you it real quick, and you're like, that's another tying back to what I said earlier about how this movie doesn't over-explain things. Like, that's a perfect detail. It doesn't need to like really linger on it because you know exactly what that means. Like, he's setting up so he can come back later and abduct her.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's real fucking creepy.
Yep. And he goes home, and he's screaming from his basement. And then we learn. All right, so then we go back to Tess and Justin Long, and she's like, "It wants you to be her baby," and this monstrous this ghoul sticks a bottle down and she suckles from it and Justin Long doesn't, so it grabs Justin Long and drags him to like this little
she
like
has
baby
a bedroom
room.
She has a bedroom with a little, it's like cots are in there, but she's not using them. She has like a little nest of blankets and then this TV that's playing this childcare videotape that we see Richard Brake buy in the flashback.
And she's just like boop 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 and like petting him and stuff. It actually reminded me of being a cat owner. Is that I feel like this is just the average experience of a cat, right? They're just like
a fun
just
tidbit. A fun tidbit, Dave. But yeah, it is very kitty cat.
Yeah.
Friend of the podcast, Greg Smith, who was on Hypecast a little while ago. He's friends with the actor that plays the monster. Oh,
that's awesome.
Yeah. It's a super tall dude in a lot lot of prosthetics playing the monster.
Sense. Yeah.
Anyway, that was just a little digression.
That's cool. So it starts nursing Justin Long. And this is it's meant to be gross and shocking.
And kind of ties into the way he described his crime, right? Like it is, like he's in a situation that this is a form of sexual assault and he's,
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I just the threads are there. Anyway.
Oh, for sure. And then Tess gets away while this is happening.
Yeah, she climbs out of the pit.
Yeah, and there's a homeless man who we saw earlier who we thought was, or the movie presents as being threatening, but he was clearly trying to warn her.
Yeah, he's like running towards her saying, don't go in that house, and then she runs away from him, and that's how she gets trapped in the basement.
Yeah,
the first time.
Well, he words it differently. He says, "Get out of that house."
Yeah,
and so that's like it's like he wants her out of the house, and so it's like kind of unnerving.
Yeah,
and so he explains as much as like, yeah, she was born down there. She's very inbred, et cetera, et cetera. We get as much as we need.
I would even have argued that you don't even. That almost
don't
feels
even
like,
need to explain,
right?
It,
like almost feels like a note because like I don't even think
you
need to explain what she is. Like I figured, like I saw this.
I figured it out.
Yeah, I saw this with Marina, and we both understood immediately what she was of what happened to her.
He's making babies down there.
Yeah, and it's clear this was just one of his captives that has only ever been in this dungeon.
Yep. And she tries to call the cops, and the cops are hilariously useless.
If you have ever had to call the cops before, they are exactly like this.
Yeah, exactly. They don't care.
Unhelpful, obtuse, like
yeah. She's trying to explain, like, I have been kidnapped, and they're like, do you have an ID on you? And it's like, no, why would I? I've been kidnapped.
And the first time she calls the cops, when the homeless guy comes running up to the house, they tell her there's no units in the area, so cops just never come. And that's like my only, I've only had to call the police like maybe 3 times in my life, and that's my only experience is either they show up and they're just obtuse as fuck and completely unhelpful, or they do not show up at all. And it's
right. There's that
more often than not, they do not show up at all.
Yeah. When you're a kid, you're told don't call 911 accidentally because the cops will show up.
No, they won't.
It's like, no, they won't. They will take any excuse not to show up. And so, yeah, they're really unhelpful, and they basically just leave.
The only reason I flagged that so hard is because coming out of the movie, that was like the one part of this movie that I could see where like
people will feel like it's unrealistic.
It's unrealistic or inauthentic. I'm like, nope, that is yeah.
It's all right. Well, here's what it is. It's not that it's unrealistic. It's that there is a chance that a cop would give a shit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, it's a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, you could get a good cop who listens to you. But that's what it is that what we show, what she experiences, it's like, oh yeah, that absolutely could happen. Mm-hmm. And in fact would happen more often than not.
And it has happened. In point of fact, one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims escaped from him, and the cops brought him back to Dahmer's house.
They sure did.
Because he was underage and they didn't believe what he was telling them.
Yep. So yeah, cops are terrible.
Cops are bad. Anyway.
Yeah. And this movie knows it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And that, again, it's kind of a theme of the episode, or the movie, of like, yeah, her being kind of no one will help her. Except for one person, and we'll get to that. And so she goes back to save Justin Long, not knowing what he is. That's clear. Just like she just values human life. She doesn't know this guy at all.
Right.
And like you could argue it wouldn't change anything if she did, but either way, it's just there's a man down there who needs help.
Yeah, and it becomes important because we see Justin Long have to make a similar decision, and boy,
yes. So Justin Long finds Richard Brake, who is
a thousand living in his little hidden room.
Yeah, and I had to pee, but I know that he shot himself, right?
Oh, yeah. So what happens is Justin Long comes in there and finds Richard Brake old as shit, completely bedridden, unable to speak. We notice that he has a bell linked up that sort of becomes a red herring because you're waiting for Richard Brake to ring the bell because he starts.
Right.
Justin Long comes in there, finds them. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to help you get out of here." And he like gives him some water, and he's like, "Don't worry, man. The cops are on their way. There's going to be 100 cops around this house in fucking 5 minutes. Don't you worry."
Right.
So Richard Brake starts like pawing at his nightstand, and we can see that there's the cord that we have seen links to the bell in the hallway. And what we saw is when Justin Long finds this room, the monster won't go in there. Like, she sees that he's standing in front of the door and she backs off. Like, she knows not to go in that room. However, there is that bell, and we see that it's like right by his bed. So we know that if he grabs that bell and rings it, the monster's going to come. Right. So like as he's pawing towards his nightstand where the bell rope is, you're like thinking that that's what he's going to do. But he actually opens the nightstand and pulls out a revolver because at that point, Justin Long has discovered Richard Brake's library of videotapes of his victims, and the movie doesn't show you the videotapes. It shows.
No, it doesn't need to.
It doesn't need to.
But,
you know, and I appreciated that because it's not necessary.
It's not necessary at all.
He pops the videotape in, and it cuts away, and then it cuts back. You hear a little bit of the audio, and you can see his face reacting to it, so you know what he's seeing.
Right,
and then he turns around, and Richard Brake is pointing the gun at him, but then he decides to shoot himself instead. So
yeah. And Justin Long picks up the gun.
Uh-huh.
He goes running down the hallway. Meanwhile, Tess is running to him, and Justin Long
what does she do?
Tess.
What does she do first? She drives the car through the house.
And hits
into the monster.
The mother.
Yeah.
And so it's like
it feels weird calling her the monster. I think the movie credits her as the mother.
It's referred to as mother.
As the mother. Yeah. So it's the mother.
But it's the monster.
It's
too.
the monster.
It's
but it's both. It's both.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, it's a Frankenstein situation, you know.
Yes.
Frankenstein isn't the monster. Yeah. And Justin Long accidentally shoots Tess thinking she's the monster, and drags her out, and they meet up with the homeless guy, and they have a moment of rest, and we get this like possible redemption for Justin Long.
He approaches his epiphany, but then he rejects it.
Yeah, where he asks himself, "Am I a monster for doing a bad thing?"
Well, he doesn't ask himself. He says, "I think I miite be a bad person." Or maybe maybe I'm a good person who did a bad thing or who did a terrible thing.
And they leave it at that, but they do answer this question shortly. Whether or not he's a bad person.
He rejected that epiphany, so he is a bad person.
Yep. The homeless guy is then like, oh, in all the years, she's never come in here, which like, oh, she's going to come in immediately. And she does. And she rips off the homeless man's arm and beats him with it.
Yep.
And Justin Long basically just runs for it and leaves behind the shot woman.
Whom he shot.
It's movie rules where like she's shot in the side and therefore she's fine, which is, it's movie rules. But she's slower,
She's pretty incapacitated, yeah.
She is. They do a good job, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. You wouldn't be moving at all if you had been shot like that.
Yeah. And so they run up this water tower, and again, Justin Long is just leaving her behind. And she limps up the water tower, and he's like, "There's nowhere to go." And then he looks down, and he's like, "I could make it." I need you to distract her.
What happens first is like he's such a goon. Like he gets to the top of the water. He's like, "There's nowhere to go," and she like limps up there. She's like, "Your gun." He's like,
Right.
"Oh right, I have a gun," and he pulls the gun out and drops it. And they set it up earlier because he does the same thing with this little kitchen knife he took with him down into the dungeon.
Right. And again, he's a cartoon character,
yeah.
so he's like, "Whoa!" whoa, whoa,"
Yeah,
and drops it.
And then, then he tells her, "I could get away, but you need to distract her. I'm so sorry." And then he grabs her by the hair and throws her off the water tower.
Throws her off to her death. And the mother, being still treating them like babies, because that's a key thing. These are her babies that ran away.
Yes.
So the idea is the monster here is not going to kill them. It just wants to drag them back to her den and nurse them.
Yeah.
It sees one of her babies fall off the water tower, and the mother jumps and cradles her and saves her life by making her land on the mother's body.
Yes.
Instead. And that's a key thing. Is the only person to help this woman is the monster.
Is the monster, yeah, the mother.
Yep, the mother. And Justin Long runs down and he's like, "Oh my God, I wasn't thinking. I'm so sorry." Like he's making excuses again because basically it's just he keeps doing horrible things and then trying to justify why he's a good person after.
Yeah.
And so she's okay. She sits up, and then and he's trying to explain it away, and then Mother sits up and grabs Justin Long and just crushes his head in a very satisfying moment.
Yeah,
because of course,
a very hilariously over the top way.
Yeah,
she basically bowling balls him and then rips his head in half.
Yeah,
so
she bowling balls him for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like cooing over Tess, who has the gun. And Tess has the gun to her face, and the mother is still cooing. And then she pulls the trigger, and the movie ends.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Cut to credits.
Yeah, and there's some flashes in the credits of her walking
away.
Yep. And that's the film.
That's the film that we just explained.
Yeah.
But it's fun to explain this film.
Yeah.
I'd say. About the quality of the film.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the reason this movie works so well, and I actually think this movie could have been very bad.
It could have been, sure.
I think it's all about the person who made it. The director, who I don't know, they made this movie very entertaining. Because when you go back and you look at this film, I would argue about 30 to 40% is the film spinning its wheels. Because this is a short film concept in a feature length. Like, for example, we see her job interview. Yeah. Why did we see her job interview?
We didn't need to.
There's a lot of misdirects. And like you said, there's symbolism behind those misdirects. But for the most part, like that whole stuff with Skarsgård and like him like having nightmares and her coming out and like that whole beginning sequence, they could have done that. Like he could have been Justin Long. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they clearly, when writing this, they had to like think of some creative ways to stretch it out, I would argue.
Yeah.
And that's, but like that is a critique, but also my point being that the way he directs those scenes is you don't mind it at all. Like even once I realized like we were spinning our wheels a little bit, the tension that they create every time, because the house kind of unfolds, you know? Mm-hmm. Where it's like she goes to the basement and then they do all the things that you would do. Is she finds the trap door, looks in and immediately is like, not going in there. Nope. Mm-hmm. And then they make her wait for a while and she gets bored. And she sets up a mirror to shine down the hallway because she's like, fuck it, I'm going to see. And she goes down and she finds that room. And it's the whole point is to contrast it with, again, like Justin Long, who just doesn't skip a beat and goes down in there.
Yeah.
But like it's the way we slowly, like half of the movie and half of the tension is just slowly getting to the monster. It feels like. Like, when does the monster show up? It feels like the halfway point is when...
At about 40 minutes, I think, is when it kills Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Who ultimately, again, he matters in what you were describing, like what he symbolizes.
Yeah.
But in terms of the plot, he's a
and it's
misdirect.
Not, I think it also, it's not super deep. Like it does have very clear themes that are executed well and are relevant. But it doesn't like. It's not like trying to say too much about anything. It's just like, hey, here's this thing that's true. Like,
right. I thought, yeah. It did a very good job with Justin Long, because there's a point where you're like, oh no, are they going to redeem this character? Like, what are we doing here with this character? Like, you better be cool with this guy, because this character is very like, you know, he's a troubling character to work with, and to suddenly make a protagonist, but he's not. Ultimately,
he's not. No, they put you in a position where you would be like willing to forgive him if he would, like, you know, step up at the end, but again, he rejects his epiphany. He doesn't. So
right, he's a piece of shit.
He's a piece of shit
through and through.
So it's like I like that.
I would say he's 3-dimensional.
Yes,
he's still a cartoon character, but he's like that's what they're doing, is they're ultimately showing like this terrible person and how he justifies himself and how he lives with himself. And it's interesting to watch it from that perspective for that reason, you know?
Yeah.
It's not trying to humanize, or rather, it's not trying to make us sympathize with this person. It's just showing like, yeah, how does a person like this exist? Like, how do they justify what they do?
Yeah,
and the way he talks about it, and the way he is like, oh, I'm so sorry about it. But it clearly isn't changing who he is.
No.
And he would do it again.
Yeah.
Like, that's
It's like there are 3 degrees of this dude, basically.
Yeah.
It's Bill Skarsgård, Justin Long, and then Richard Brake, basically.
Yeah.
So that's like Pokemon evolution of a fucking monster.
Exactly.
And they introduce you to them in that order.
Right. Yeah, of like, oh, I'm just a nice guy. I'm a little pushy. I'm a little like, and she's into him. Like, ultimately,
yeah,
he wins her over.
Yeah,
and then Justin Long, who is the more like the creep that most women would encounter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then Richard Brake, which is like the nightmare version.
Yeah,
yeah. And then of course, yeah, that's why like Mother is clearly like the threat, but not the villain.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said it felt weird calling her the monster. Because it's like, well, yes, but also it's, you know.
Right. Right. And this is all the theme of the movie, you know? It's very interesting. Again, it feels like it has to do some stretching, but it's what we're describing here, which is that it spends its time like, it's a simple enough message, but it does spend its time when it's the stretching it spends on that idea, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like efficiency of plot, like, it is very meandering. Again, like that job interview scene, I'm pretty sure there's no reason for it to be there.
No, absolutely not. It maybe adds a little bit of tension just because, like, the woman she interviews with tells her, oh, you shouldn't be staying in that neighborhood. But we already knew that. Right. Like, we already knew she shouldn't be in that neighborhood.
The movie very elegantly does this, which is that the first night she shows up, you can't see anything. You see it in the trailer.
It's just really dark, Which is scary.
She wakes up, and then when she wakes up the next day, there's the reveal that the neighborhood is literally abandoned.
Yeah.
There is none of the houses, they're all torn apart.
None of them are inhabitable.
Yeah, except for this one house.
Yeah. So it's like,
which I would argue is a misdirect
creepier,
as well.
But in a different way. Is it?
Yeah. A little bit, because then you have to wonder, like, Well, I guess it does. You do find out why, but it's just like, oh, is there something supernatural about this house then? Why is this house the only house taken care of in all of this? Mm-hmm. And we sort of learn that Richard Brake, there's a scene where he talks to his neighbor, and the neighbor's like, we're moving out. And he's like, well, I'm not going anywhere. So the implication is that Richard Brake took care of the house, and only recently it got sold, you know?
Yeah. I think, or I mean, it also seems like, you know, Justin Long probably had it remodeled when he bought it.
Right. That's true too. Oh yeah, because they show the inside of the house. It's again, they don't explain it, but you don't need it explained either.
No, it's all there.
Yeah. There's a lot of elements in this movie that are, I would argue, are like big misdirects.
Yes.
Or like filler. Again, the whole Bill Skarsgård stuff, like they didn't need to spend that much time on it, right? And like the part where he's like talking in his sleep, again, that doesn't matter, you know. That's like a filler jump scare situation. And so like
kind of, although I will say that this movie doesn't really do jump scares, which is nice.
No. That's the thing, is like everything I'm describing, the reason I'm saying like if it was a different director, I think I would hate this, is because that's the sort of cheap ass moment where they would do a jump scare. And they don't really do a jump scare. It's all about tension with this director. It's like slowly increasing the tension as opposed to trying to cram in a bunch of like shitty jump scares while nothing's happening. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah,
so
exactly.
Like, even though nothing's happening, I kept feeling more and more on edge because, you know, it feels like a slow burn, which there's nothing wrong with a slow burn. You know, we compared this to Psycho.
Yeah.
So like, it's all to say that on paper, I think this movie, like the script is fine, but I think the script really you could have taken the same script and made a shittier version of this I would have really disliked.
Yes, yeah. This movie is really, really, I won't say saved because, like you said, the script is fine.
And the director is the writer.
Yes. So like the movie really owes a lot to the directing, for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I assume the director had that in mind. There's all little things like the opening shot. I love the little sound effects they do, where she pulls up and there's this
so there's like a cacophony of screams and moaning that just disappears as soon as it goes inside her car. Yeah. And you hear that once or twice more, but not, it's very subtle. Right. But I really like, and it's such a creepy, ominous way to start the movie. Yeah. And there's a lot of that. And I appreciate that trend now, and I know it's the trend itself is a cliche, but I much more appreciate a director trying to find ways to make you unnerved than to simply throw a loud noise at you, right? To make you jump. Mood goes so much farther than a cat jumping out of the closet. Exactly. Like keeping that mood is so important. And it's more impressive when it's done. Yeah, I think it requires more skill. It's more enjoyable. Like it doesn't. Yeah. It's more engaging. Like it keeps you more engaged. Right. Because jump scares take you out of the movie. Yeah, if they're done badly, yeah. Yeah, and they're almost always done badly. So yeah. Not everything. Not the Exorcist 3 jump scare, but like most jump scares. Most jump scares. I think there has to be. Personally, I think what makes a good jump scare is if it's from the perspective. Actually, no. I was going to say from the perspective of the protagonist, or from the perspective of the character being surprised, but that's not always the case. That Exorcist 3 one isn't that. No. It's hard. It's hard to actually pin down what makes a good one. I think it has to actually be. It shouldn't be a fake one, right? It shouldn't be like a friend tapping someone on the shoulder. Yeah. That's dumb. That's it. Like I said, the cat. It shouldn't be the noise. Cat. Yeah. Yeah. It shouldn't just be a loud noise and a cut. Like anybody can do that, right? Anybody can just cut away to something scary and do a loud noise. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a real. I know it when I sees it type of situation too.
But this doesn't really, again, it doesn't have too much in terms of that. It's more about the audience sort of, like, for the most part, the audience was laughing. Like, once the monster showed up, the audience was mostly laughing. It's not a scary movie. Like, it's a lot of tension, and then once you hit the halfway point, that tension breaks when you see what this monster is, and you realize that you're kind of rooting for the monster.
Yeah.
Because that's the point, you know? Mm-hmm. It's more fun, I would say.
Yeah.
This movie. And maybe that's why people compare it to Malignant, because Malignant is definitely not scary either.
No. And then once once the penny drops in Malignant, it just becomes just a ride. It's like, oh, okay.
And this is kind of no different.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you kind of know, like, people were laughing at every step because I think everybody knew what the deal was. Everybody sort of knew that Tess was going to be fine and Justin Long was going to get what's coming to him.
Yeah.
And the only time the audience was like, oh my God, is when he throws her, because the movie knows that we know, right? And so they do something shocking in that moment. And you don't think about it in the second. You're like, oh fuck, they're actually going to kill her. And then the fact that the mother saves her is just like, oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really think about it or see it coming. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Very, very well constructed. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. This is a very well made film. It's a lot of fun. It's really tense.
I'm curious about rewatching, because I think it'll be very boring to rewatch.
It might be, yeah.
I don't know. Because again, the first half is a lot of building towards nothing.
But the filmmaking is very interesting. So I think really that aspect of it will hold up on rewatches.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
No. It's a fun movie.
Pretty good movie. The writer director was one of the members of The Whitest Kids You Know, a sketch comedy group.
Oh, good for him. Yeah. I didn't know Justin Long was in this, although I saw an interview where he was talking about Barbarian, and he's in another movie. And in my head, I was like, oh, I must have mistaken the two movies. And so, like, I tricked myself into being surprised that Justin Long showed up. That was kind of fun.
I didn't know. I didn't think I realized he was in it. I think I remember us spotting a brief shot of him in the trailer when we covered it in a Hypecast, but then from then to now, I completely forgot he was in it.
Yeah.
So when he showed up, I was like, "Oh shit!"
I showed up singing in the car. It's like instantly. They also within 30 seconds, you're like, "Oh, this character's a fucking clown.
This guy is a douche clown."
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah.
So go check it out. It's a lot of fun. Obviously it deals with some concerning issues, sexual violence, but it never actually shows anything.
No,
which doesn't mean it isn't also upsetting.
No.
But it's on not, theme. It's also not.
It's not exploitative in that way.
It isn't, and it is like tied into the plot in a way that's relevant.
Yes.
It's not just being shocking. Again, this movie. It is the script too. Like, I don't want to say the script was bad and the director saved it. It's just a lot of the themes and stuff. There's just such you could have easily made a shitty version of this, like a version that wasn't thoughtful, that just went for shock value. You know, there was so many ways they could have fucked this up and they didn't, and that's really, I don't know. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty good.
So check it out. All right, I'm done.
It's a good film. All right, we should tell him some stuff, Dave.
Patreon. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Why'd you
go
do
to
that?
Patreon. Listen. Patreon. Patreon.com/gamefully unemployed. If you go on there, you get exclusive podcasts like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman and Fox Mulder's Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. Those are all on there for $5 a month. We also watch movies with our patrons every Friday night. That's for a little more. There's a bunch of things on there, so go check it out.
Check that out. We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com. You can find a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, stickers, posters, mugs, I think. All sorts of things. So check that out.
Oh, one last thing. Bill Skarsgård showing up and saying, "My name is Keith." I was like, "Your name is not Keith.
Your name is not Keith. His
You're
name
Skarsgård.
His name shouldn't be Bill either. Honestly, like
yeah, you're right.
How
Bill
is his name
weird
Bill?
Too. Yeah, it's almost like a vampire trying to act like a human.
Yeah,
because making up first name they think of. I
don't believe that. Not for 1 second.
No. We're on to you, Skarsgårds.
Mm-hmm. We know. We've known.
Oh, we've known.
Yeah.